it's been revealed that Prince Andrew, well, he reportedly told Jeffrey Epstein that we're in this together, and also expressed a desire to, quote, play some more, just months after saying that he had severed ties with the convicted pedophile.
That Andrew, who claims to be a great supporter of the monarchy, could be actually one of the instruments that brings it down. And it seems these events are playing in very much to that argument.
You've been on his private plane?
Yes.
You've been to stay on his private island?
Yes.
You've stayed at his home in Palm Beach?
Yes.
You've visited Ghislaine Maxwell's house in Belgravia in London?
Yes.
The relationship with Epstein went on a lot longer than both Sarah and Andrew have said, had admitted. But it is very damaging. I mean, it's just another of the lies from the Newsnight interview. I think there's a lot more still to come. I'm aware my own research is only the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot of material that I have which I hope now can come out. We know, for example, that Sarah Ferguson was staying at one of Epstein's flats as late as 2013 and 14. So, I mean, what they say in public and what they do in private are clearly two very different things.
Well, we were close friends. I mean, we were friends.
The Duke of York is said to have sent the message on February 28, 2011, and in this email obtained by The Sun, it appears that he has contradicted his interview that he gave on BBC's Newsnight back in 2019, an interview we'll never forget, in which he claimed that he had not spoken to Epstein since December 2010.
The British monarchy, an institution built on the precarious pillars of perception, duty, and deference, has survived for over 1,000 years. It has weathered civil wars, abdication crises, and the relentless glare of the modern media. Its survival hinges on a simple, unspoken contract with the public, to be a symbol of national stability, above the fray of common scandal. But what happens when a senior royal becomes not a pillar, but a wrecking ball? When one man's actions, his hubris, and his profoundly toxic associations threaten to drag the entire House of Windsor into the abyss. This is not the story of a family rift or a mere embarrassment. This is the story of Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, and how his entanglement with Jeffrey Epstein became a slow-burning fuse attached to the very foundations of the crown. The imagery is carefully curated. The balcony of Buckingham Palace, the Trooping the Colour, the Christmas Day walk to church, all are tableaus of unity and tradition. But since 2019, a ghost has haunted these scenes. Prince Andrew, once a fixture, is now a conspicuous absence. His removal was a surgical necessity, an attempt by the institution to save itself from the poison of his association. But the poison has a name, and it echoes from beyond the grave: Jeffrey Epstein.
I'd say it's an out-and-out lie. This shows that he contacted Epstein, that he was in this friendship with him deeply, you know, that we're in it together. He tried to paint that his friendship with Epstein was a sort of passing thing, they weren't that close, that sort of thing. Also, the timing of this email, it came the day after the picture was published in the Mail on Sunday of his arm around Virginia Giuffre. Now, if he had an issue with that picture at the time, if he didn't know who that woman was, or has this photo been manipulated, he would have surely have said that to Epstein in that email. He didn't. The fact he didn't draw that to the attention of Epstein the day after it had been published, and then later went on to say, I don't know who she is, I've never met her. The optics on it are terrible. Now, the king has to act, because this is going to affect the monarchy. The fact is they're losing credibility around this. You cannot have Andrew sitting there. He needs to be stripped of his title. He needs to be stripped of Order of the Garter. I don't know how you get him out of that house, because he's got a long lease on it. But if you think King Edward VIII was exiled because he abdicated and wanted to marry a divorcee, the fact that, you know, on the scale of wrongdoing, that is tiny compared to a guy fraternising with a pedophile. Andrew needs to be exiled.
The relationship between Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein began in the late 1990s, introduced by Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter of disgraced media mogul Robert Maxwell, to the outside world. And seemingly to Andrew, Epstein was a man of mysterious, boundless wealth, a financier with a taste for high society. For a prince often described as entitled and lacking in judgment, Epstein's world of private jets, lavish homes, and a network of powerful friends was intoxicating. This was the first critical failure of judgment. The royal family's advisors, the grey suits of the palace, are tasked with vetting associations. Yet, Andrew, then Britain's special representative for international trade and investment, plunged headlong into this friendship. He was a guest at Epstein's New York mansion, his Palm Beach estate, and his private island, Little St. James. He traveled on the Lolita Express, Epstein's Boeing 727. Photographs emerged of them strolling through Central Park in 2011, after Epstein had already been convicted in 2008 for soliciting a minor for prostitution. This was the first clear signal that Andrew's personal compass was catastrophically flawed. The palace's response was a masterclass in muted deflection. He was, they insisted, maintaining a friendship with a man who had since been convicted. The implication was that Andrew was loyal, perhaps to a fault. But the public and the media were not buying it. The question began to form: what kind of man, what kind of prince, stands by a convicted sex offender? The answer, it seemed, was a prince who saw himself as untouchable, while his brother, the then Prince Charles, was meticulously curating his image as a future king, and his nephew, William, was being groomed for a life of service. Andrew was operating in a shadow world, seemingly oblivious to the stench that followed his benefactor. He was, in effect, building a bomb and handing the detonator to his enemies. If the friendship was a lit fuse, then the BBC's Newsnight interview with Emily Maitlis in November 2019 was the explosion. Conceived by Andrew and his team as a way to quell the rumors and restore his reputation, it instead became one of the most spectacular acts of reputational self-immolation in modern history. It was here that the prince's arrogance, his profound lack of self-awareness, and his disconnect from the public he serves were laid bare for all to see. The interview was a cascade of catastrophic missteps. He sought to debunk a specific allegation from a survivor, Virginia Giuffre, who claimed she was forced to have sex with him on 3 separate occasions when she was 17. His chosen defense was not a simple, dignified denial. It was a series of bizarre, unforced errors that begged belief. He claimed that on one of the alleged occasions, a visit to a London nightclub, Tramp, he had taken his daughter, Beatrice, to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party. The specificity of the detail, the pizza restaurant in a nondescript English town, was so jarringly mundane it felt like a poly-scripted alibi. He then stated that he had a medical condition at the time, which meant he did not sweat, attempting to counter Giuffre's description of him sweating profusely as they danced. But the most damning moment, the one that truly revealed his character, was his utter lack of empathy for Epstein's victims. When Maitlis asked him if he regretted his whole friendship with Epstein, he replied, not with contrition for the victims, but with regret for the inconvenience it had caused. There was no "I am sorry for the victims he exploited." No "I am horrified by what he did." Instead, there was a cold, transactional assessment of the useful opportunities the friendship afforded him. To the millions watching, this was not a prince. This was a man exposed as callous, entitled, and utterly out of touch. The monarchy, which relies on a perception of basic human decency, was now being represented by a man who appeared to possess none.
In 2006, in May, an arrest warrant was issued for Epstein for sexual assault of a minor.
Yes.
In July, he was invited to Windsor Castle to your daughter, Princess Beatrice's 18th birthday. Why would you do that?
And it puts a lot of pressure on the king, because I think there's a very strong public feeling that something needs to be done. I think there needs to be an investigation into Andrew's time as a special trade envoy, which is when he did a lot of his business with Epstein. I think there are grounds now to remove some of his titles and responsibilities. It's ridiculous. He's still a Knight of the Garter, and he's still, I think, an honorary Vice Admiral and a Councillor of State.
I mean, there's nothing remotely honourable about this individual, is there? And you do have to, in a way, I don't know whether you agree with this, Andrew, I'm perplexed by how many people are sort of only dimly aware of the whole saga, or they've just got so used to the idea that he's such a liability, and indeed worse than a liability, that it's not quite the talking point that it should be.
Well, I mean, time and time again, I've been surprised. I mean, there was a 2022 High Court case in which there was £1.3 million of unexplained money paid to the Yorks, and nothing happened really as a result of that. The press hardly covered the story. You know, we had Sarah selling access to Andrew for £500,000 in 2010. It was a sort of weekend scandal, and that was it. And I mean, talking to people, I mean, even school friends of Andrew, they say he was an accident waiting to happen. But I think the attitude of the royal family is to sort of hope that the problem goes away, because they don't quite know what to do. And so it's easier to do nothing than address the thing and try and get ahead of the narrative, which is what they need to do. Because I think the danger is that he's now infecting the whole body politic. And, there are calls now for a republic. I don't think that's going to happen. But support for the monarchy is rapidly draining away, and it's undermining the good work that all the other members of the royal family do.
Andrew isn't going to go away, partly because he's in his, mid-60s, and let's face it, long life is in his genes. He could be staggering around the Windsor estate for the next 3 decades, couldn't he? But presumably he cannot stay in that huge house, Royal Lodge.
Well, I think the problem is he can, because he's got a pretty ironclad lease. But you're right, the optics look terrible, and somehow he needs to be persuaded to move. I mean, there are options for him. I mean, he could go into exile in the way that Duke of Windsor did. He has been offered a palace in Abu Dhabi. We had the Rwanda scheme. Could we not reinstate that for Andrew? So there are places where he could quietly hide away and be forgotten. But you're right, he could go on for a long time. I think if he was to come forward and perhaps, give an interview where he actually told the truth, that would go to some way to satisfying public opinion. Because at the moment, the worry, I think, particularly for the royal family, is that there's more stuff to come out. We have Virginia Giuffre's book. We have the memoirs of a woman called Juliet Bryant. We have clearly congressmen now prepared to name names. We're going to have more of these leaks coming. A lot of names that were taken out of the hardback. For example, like Peter Mandelson are clearly involved in this. I mean, there are a lot of people feeding in these waters.
Right. In the meantime, you suggest that Prince Andrew will need to be persuaded to move out of Royal Lodge, for example. Why can't he simply be ordered to get out? He must know. I know he's got an absolutely mind-boggling lack of self-awareness, but even someone as daft as him must realise how much damage he's doing to the royal brand. Shouldn't they just tell him to go?
Well, they can't. I mean, it's owned by the Crown Estates, which is sort of meant to be sort of arm's length. The lease is pretty secure there. As long as he upholds the fabric of the house, then he can stay. This is his last bit of royal status, really. And for him, everything is about status. He has very little sense of his own identity. I mean, he describes himself as a prince first, a naval officer second, and a husband third. Well, he kind of failed at the second and third, but this is the one thing he can still hang on to, and he wants to be able to pass it on to his children, I think. And he has, as we saw at Duchess of Kent's funeral, very little sense of self-awareness or an ability to read the room. And he's stubborn, and he thinks there's no reason for him to go, so he won't go.
The Duchess of Kent's funeral, and it's a great shame for her that her funeral was overshadowed by this, but was notable because Andrew made a determined effort to be seen to be talking in public to Prince William, who could not have looked less delighted to be involved. That was pretty awful to look at. It was rather grotesque, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, the royal family clearly are embarrassed by him. The danger is that they almost need to keep him close for worry that he might do something dramatic. I mean, there are always worries that there'll be an Andrew Morton figure who will release stories that they prefer not to come out. But yes, I mean, he was, hoping to get a bit of attention. I mean, the ridiculous thing is that King Charles seems to have allowed him to have a police escort from Windsor to the funeral. He was given a front row seat. So in some ways, it's not just Prince Andrew, but I think other members of the institution, I mean, in the office, who need to reconsider how they're treating him. They are way behind public opinion on this.
So do you think the king then is partly responsible and perhaps needs to have a confrontation and actually deal with his brother one-on-one?
Well, I think there have been attempts to do this. I mean, he thought that he could push him out of Royal Lodge. There were assurances that Andrew could afford to live there. The problem is you can't believe anything Andrew says. I don't think he told the truth entirely about the Newsnight interview to his family. I don't think he's been entirely open about his sources of wealth to them. There needs to be a bit more due diligence. The palace is filled with former spooks. I think they should be reporting. But my own research showed that when the spooks did report to the Queen and the Queen's private secretary, that nothing was done. He was protected, and he knows he's protected.
And as you say, there is that real risk that he likes money, he could take a juicy offer from a publisher and tell all, although you might know more than me, Andrew, but I'm not quite sure what all would amount to. Can you give us some hints?
Well, I mean, I don't know either, but, clearly there are perhaps embarrassing episodes in the family's history, perhaps relating to Queen, Prince Philip, King Charles, who knows, Harry and Meghan. There must be stories there that are of interest that he's not related. This was always the worry with Sarah Ferguson, which is why they kept her close over the years. We don't know what we don't know, but I suspect there are a lot of secrets that they have which could be divulged, which would be very damaging to the monarchy. I mean, the irony is that in my book entitled, I end the book by saying that Andrew, who claims to be a great supporter of the monarchy, could be actually one of the instruments that brings it down. And it seems these events are playing in very much to that argument.
And the next looming deadline, if you like, for Andrew will be the late Virginia Giuffre's book, which I think comes out, is it next week or the week after?
Yes, it's out next week. As I say, there are other books coming out. I think a more serious one called Blue Butterfly next month. But, people are now prepared to talk. Things are beginning to emerge. And I only think it can get worse for the royal family and for Andrew.
The fallout was immediate and brutal. Corporate sponsors fled his charitable ventures, Pitch Palace. Military affiliations and royal patronages were stripped from him. Within days, he was forced to step back from public duties. The institution had been forced to amputate a limb to save the body. The Queen, his mother and long rumored to have a soft spot for her second son, was ultimately forced to choose between her child and the survival of the crown. The crown, as it always must. 1. Andrew was cast out, a pariah in the palace he called home. But banishment was not the end. It was merely the beginning of a new, more insidious phase. While Andrew retreated to Royal Lodge, the controversy refused to die. It was kept alive by the relentless tide of legal proceedings in the United States. The civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre and the criminal trial of Ghislaine Maxwell acted as a drumbeat of scandal, ensuring the British public would not be allowed to forget. The unsealing of court documents in early 2024, as part of Giuffre's long-settled case against Epstein, provided a fresh avalanche of damning details. While much was known, the raw, unredacted pages offered a more granular, and therefore more shocking, insight into the world Andrew willingly inhabited. The documents contained testimonies from witnesses and victims describing a prostitution ring, the routine trafficking of young girls, and the powerful men who participated. Though Andrew was not a central figure in these specific documents, his name was woven throughout the sordid tapestry. Every mention of Prince, Royal, or Andrew in those thousands of pages was a fresh cut to the monarchy's veneer. It reinforced the narrative that a senior royal was a key player in Epstein's social orbit, lending the predator an unearned sheen of respectability. For the public, it was impossible to dissociate the two. Epstein's depravity was, by extension, staining the throne. This period also highlighted Andrew's most powerful and most controversial defender, his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth II. Despite the public outcry and the palace's official stance, the Queen's personal support for her son was an open secret. She was photographed driving with him to a church service at Windsor, a very public show of maternal solidarity shortly after he was stripped of his roles. For the monarch, it was a human gesture. For the institution, it was a dangerous blurring of lines. It suggested that at the highest level, there was a reluctance to fully confront the toxicity of Andrew's actions. It fed the narrative of a family closing ranks, of privilege protecting its own, even in the face of alleged horrific acts. When the Queen passed in September 2022, Andrew lost his most powerful shield. King Charles III and Prince William, the monarchy's future, have long been understood to have a far less sentimental view of the Andrew problem. They see him not as a wronged brother or uncle, but as an active threat to the crown's viability in the 21st century. The accession of King Charles III presented a stark new reality for Prince Andrew. The new king had spent a lifetime preparing for the role, and his vision for a slimmed-down monarchy was well known. Andrew, toxic and dormant, did not fit into this vision. He was a relic of a bygone era of royal entitlement, a walking liability in a world where every penny of public money and every action of a royal is scrutinized. The king's dilemma was immense. Andrew is his brother. Yet, the institution Charles now embodies is more fragile than it appears. Its support, particularly among the young, is not a given. It must constantly prove its worth. A scandal of this magnitude, involving sex trafficking, underage girls, and a senior royal, is the kind of thing that can tip public sentiment from apathetic tolerance to active opposition.
Well, in 2000, Epstein was a guest at Windsor Castle, and at Sandringham he was brought right into the heart
Yes,
of the royal family at your invitation. You threw a birthday party for Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, at Sandringham.
The monarchy's strategy has been one of containment. Andrew was barred from wearing a military uniform at the Queen's funeral and the coronation. He was evicted from Buckingham Palace and his office there shuttered. He remains a Councillor of State, a constitutional role that allows him to stand in for the monarch, a fact that caused such public alarm that Parliament moved to add Princess Anne and Prince Edward to the list to prevent Andrew ever being called upon. But containment is not a permanent solution. Andrew continues to live a life of luxury in the 30-room Royal Lodge, funded in part by a contentious multi-million-pound loan from the Queen's estate. Reports of tensions with King Charles over the funding of his security and lifestyle are frequent. Every headline about his financial dealings, every glimpse of him on the grounds of Windsor, is a reminder of the festering problem at the heart of the family. He is, in effect, the monarchy's ghost. He cannot appear, but his absence is a loud, persistent reminder of the scandal. He is a drag on their reputation, a counter-narrative to their carefully crafted image of service and duty. While William and Catherine project modernity and empathy, Andrew's shadow speaks of arrogance, exploitation, and a flagrant abuse of position. He is the living embodiment of every Republican argument against hereditary privilege. So, how does one man drag a 1,000-year-old institution down? Not with a single act, but with a death by 1,000 cuts. Each photograph with Epstein, each tone-deaf interview answer, each court document unsealed, each report of his lavish lifestyle, it all accumulates. Prince Andrew's actions strike at the three core tenets of the modern monarchy's legitimacy. First, moral authority. The monarchy's right to rule in a democratic age is predicated on it representing the nation's best self. It is supposed to be a moral compass. How can it claim this role when a senior member is so deeply enmeshed with a convicted sex trafficker and shows such a stunning lack of remorse? It creates a hypocrisy that its enemies can wield with devastating effect. Second, the contract of service. Royals are funded by the public purse, both directly and indirectly. In return, they are expected to serve. Andrew's behavior represents the antithesis of service. It is the pinnacle of self-service, of using his title for personal gratification and access to a world of grotesque privilege. It makes a mockery of the hard work of other royals and fuels the argument that the family is a drain on the nation, not a service to it. Third, relevance. For the monarchy to survive the reigns of Charles and William, it must prove it is not an anachronism. It must be seen as a force for good, stability, and unity. Andrew is a walking anachronism. He represents the worst excesses of unaccountable aristocracy. He makes the institution look outdated, secretive, and corrupt. In an era of #Me Too and heightened social justice, his association with the exploitation of young women is a recipe for irrelevance. He is not actively plotting the monarchy's downfall. He is too self-absorbed for such a grand scheme. His weapon is his own unshakable sense of entitlement. By simply being who he is, and by refusing to fade quietly into the background, he forces the institution into impossible choices, creates constant negative headlines, and ensures that the name Epstein remains, forever, linked to the House of Windsor. The problem of Prince Andrew has no clean solution. A civil settlement with Virginia Giuffre, reportedly funded by the Queen, may have ended the immediate legal threat, but it did nothing to cleanse the stain. It was seen by many as the ultimate act of privilege, using vast wealth to make a problem disappear, without ever admitting fault. The monarchy is trapped. They cannot rehabilitate him. The public would never accept it. They cannot fully cut him off financially without risking a bitter, public-family feud that would be just as damaging. So, he remains in his gilded cage at Royal Lodge, a permanent, looming crisis. The reign of King Charles III was meant to be one of renewal, of a modernized, streamlined monarchy ready for the future. Instead, he has inherited a brother-shaped anchor, threatening to drag his reign back into the scandals of the past. Every time the King or the Prince of Wales speaks of duty and service, the ghost of Andrew mocks their words from the sidelines. The British monarchy has survived revolutions and wars. It may yet survive Prince Andrew. But the cost will be immense, a permanent scar on its reputation, a lingering doubt in the public mind, and the inescapable truth that one of its own, through his own catastrophic choices, became the institution's most dangerous internal enemy. The damage he has wrought is not a single headline or a lost lawsuit. It is a slow, corrosive poison, and the monarchy will be drinking the antidote for a generation.